I thank the gentleman. I thank the distinguished chairman of the committee for yielding time. And I rise in opposition to this motion for disapproval, a resolution of disapproval. I listened to the gentlelady from North Carolina's debate, and it occurs to me that there must be real parallels in 1929 and 30 and 31 and 32, and yes, even in 33 and 34, as the government responded, as the American people responded to what had not been responded to during the 4 years of the Hoover administration to try to staunch the fall of the economy, which led ultimately to 25 to 30% unemployment along food lines. I'm sure we're going to be hearing rhetoric which will blame the Obama administration, which has after all been in office for some 36 hours, for the problems that confront our country. But in fact, no president in recent memory has inherited conditions here and around the world more difficult than this president has inherited. The majority of the President Bush's party did not support him in trying to respond to the crisis that confronts us. In fact, less than half voted for the original TARP, and as the gentlelady from North Carolina has pointed out, she was not one of them. She did not believe that a response was appropriate, or at least this response was not appropriate. That, I think, is a philosophically defensible position, which she defends. I disagreed then and disagree now. We, in a bipartisan way, supported the Bush administration's request for not $350 but the $700 billion. We are the ones who, however, who put constraints on that. And we said, you need to come back. We are the ones who also, notwithstanding the failure of the Bush administration to request it, put yesterday in a bipartisan vote additional constraints for accountability and transparency and for focusing on those folks who are at risk of losing their homes. The gentlelady, I know, did not vote for that either. Today, I think that every member of the House is thinking back to words we said in a similar debate 4 months ago when the TARP was originally in front of us, and wondering whether we can still stand by them. Mr. Speaker, I know I can stand by mine. Here's what I said the first time TARP came to the floor. And I would remind people this was a proposal by President Bush and by Secretary Paulson, supported by Federal Reserve Chairman Bernanke, appointed by President Bush. The Democrats listened to the president, Republican president, but our president of our country, and we responded. And I said this: imagine if we do nothing today. Millions more homes will likely be foreclosed on. Banks would likely be unable to lend. Credit, the lifeblood of any economy, might dry up across America. That was my quote. We responded. We responded with a $700 billion bill, half of which has now been allocated and promised, in ways different than the Bush administration originally said it was going to do it, because it saw the facts changing. The vote on TARP was one of the most difficult any of us have taken, certainly one of the largest commitments that this country has taken. And I know that none of us, whichever way we voted, are completely happy with TARP's results so far. However, a principal advisor to John McCain, Mr. Zandi, has opined both on this and on the stimulus package, this is necessary. It may not be desirable from a voting standpoint, but it is necessary from our country's standpoint, from our economy's standpoint. The worst we have seen since the Hoover administration. I stand by my words because I remain convinced that inaction would have been far more dangerous and far more costly. Since the House took that unpopular vote, the flow of necessary lending has begun to resume, not fast enough. Not in a way that has brought our economy back, not in a way that has staunched the loss of jobs, but every economist that I talk to, from Marty Feldstein, conservative economist, Republican economist, to Larry Summers, Paul Volcker in the current administration. Much more work will be needed before our economy has recovered. but restoring credit is an essential step toward that goal. That is why both President Bush and President Obama agreed that this action was necessary. I don't want to be deluded by the fact, I don't want any American deluded by the fact that President Bush would have asked for this simply because President Obama asked for it. After all, he could have easily replied, very frankly, you're going to be in office pretty soon, you can ask for it. No, President Bush felt this was a critical item to move forward as quickly as possible. Why? Because Secretary Paulson, his principal financial advisor, Ben Bernanke, his appointment to the Federal Reserve chairmanship, all believed it was necessary to move. That is why we must vote down this disapproval resolution and release the remaining $350 billion. Now, our American public, our constituents, may be confused because this action will not mean anything. Why will it not mean anything? Because the Senate has already acted. And the Senate has acted in a bipartisan vote to defeat a motion for disapproval. Because the majority of the Senate, in a bipartisan fashion, concluded that it was necessary. Not that it was desirable, but that it was necessary. None of us want to be in this position. But we owe it to the American public and to our economy and to our families to have the courage of doing that which is not desirable, but that which is certainly necessary. It should strengthen our confidence to know that President Obama has learned from the mistakes that were made during the Bush administration in administering this sum of money. That's not a criticism. Mistakes are made. But we can learn from those mistakes, and we will learn from those mistakes. As the new president promised, quote, we're going to fundamentally change some of the practices in using this next phase of the program. We voted to do that yesterday as well. That means finally fighting the wave of foreclosures at the source of this crisis. It means tracking how TARP funds are spent and ensuring that banks are using them for the intended purposes. It means stronger oversight from Congress and detailed reports from the recipients of taxpayers' money. And it means guaranteeing that taxpayers are not subsidizing million-dollar Park Avenue apartments for CEOs. The TARP Reforms and Accountability Act set all of those conditions. And I congratulate Chairman Frank for his leadership in bringing that to the floor and congratulate my colleagues for passing it. President Obama has made it clear that he will hold to those principles. I understand before I got on the floor, the gentlelady observed that that bill may not be passed by the Senate. And therefore, why should we have passed it? One could respond with equal, I think, intellectual honesty. The Senate's already acted. Why should we now act? And I think the response would be because we have a responsibility to state our opinion on an issue of great importance. That is the diligence we would expect. I'm almost.
No, for a question.
I'm almost finished, and I will yield to you as soon as I.
The gentleman from Maryland controls the time.
That is the diligence we would expect from any lender, and how much more so when the source of the funds is the American taxpayer, when the principal runs in 12 digits, and when the stakes are so high. That is why we acted yesterday. I'm hopeful the Senate will act as well, but I'm even more hopeful that President Obama will follow the principles incorporated in yesterday's legislation. With TARP funds already beginning to take effect, and with these new safeguards in place, I ask my colleagues to release the remaining funds. Votes like these are never easy, and I understand we can rationalize that our vote will have no effect, whether we approve or disapprove the resolution of disapproval. But we need to stand with, frankly, President Bush and President Obama, two leaders elected by our country in different elections, who have both said to us, this program may not be something we want to do, but it is something that we must do. And because of that, I urge my colleagues to vote no on the resolution of disapproval. I'm pleased to yield to my friend, the gentlelady from North Carolina.
And I thank